Ingo, how are you doing today?
All right, very busy. Sorry for the short delay.
Yeah, we
How are
usually
you doing?
start a few minutes early, just like a real German company, always punctual. So today it's 3 p.m. here on the clock. I'm doing very well, thanks. Weather is clearing up for the weekend, so some good days to look forward to. How about you, Ingo?
Same here, very busy week. I'll be flying to the US to the POI meeting in Chicago on the weekend, and visiting the family where I stayed when I was in high school for a year, visiting that on the weekend before. So
Good.
looking forward to that.
Very nice. And yeah, if anyone in the audience here today is at POI in Chicago, please let us know. Meet us there, come to our booth, and chat about RGM. Today, Ingo, we have a pretty interesting topic. Let's pull up the slides. It's about pricing strategy and how to combine the best of both. And as I said last time we had this webinar, you really have the perfect profile for it because you did some academic research on strategy, but also spent most of your career in pricing and revenue growth management. So I'm looking forward to these two worlds colliding today. And yeah, hopefully we'll learn how we can get profitable growth through better pricing strategy. Shall we go to the next intro slide, Ingo? Oh yeah, let's have everyone also tell us where they come from today. So if you can, in the chat, just write, I don't know, your country or city that you're from today. Please write it in the comments. Always nice to see where people are joining from. And I see very international people today. So some from Scandinavia, North America, Switzerland, Hungary, UK, a few people, Germany. Okay, quite nice. Very international crowd today. So very good to see. Obviously, the pricing and revenue management community is relatively small compared to the size of the world and everyone's industries, but it's always good to see that we're so international and we can gather a lot of people from around the world here in this webinar. So yeah, let's move on to the next slide. I introduced Ingo a little bit here. Ingo is the co-founder and managing director at Buynomics. He has over 15 years of experience in pricing, and he also developed the Buynomics method, our virtual shopper AI, that we can tell you more about if you're interested. And I'm Paul, and I've been with Buynomics for almost 4 years. And I'm working in the growth team, so generating new conversations. And so get in touch with me if you want to learn more about Buynomics. But we'll explain a bit about the solution today. So Buynomics is a software for RGM teams and pricing teams. Our virtual shopper AI is really at the core of that. It allows for a holistic approach, no more silos, but really everything in one place. High accuracy, high speed, and at the end of the day, higher profits. And with that, I hand over to you, Ingo, because profits and growth are also part of pricing strategy. So over to you, Ingo.
Thanks, Paul. And thanks everyone for joining, and Paul also for the very generous introduction on my background. So the strategy work, that's a long time ago, back in university. I would say I'm now much more on the revenue growth management side. So yeah, but nevertheless, let's get these two things together. And I think for good measure, because it's what many talk about at the moment, we'll also throw in a little bit of Gen AI into the ring and see what comes out of it. Because I think there's actually an interesting angle that we're working on and discovering that Gen AI can also bring to the RGM field and particularly in a strategic context. So, but before we do that, let's get started with just 2-3 minutes on something basic so that we have a common understanding what we're talking about in strategy. Why is that actually pricing strategy? I think it's, if you come just from like a purely simple microeconomic world, it's not obvious why there is pricing strategy. Because if there is, as what we've seen probably in university quite a lot, there is a price and sales relationship. If prices increase, sales go down. And if this is all there is, so we're living in a single product world, nothing else matters, and this is what it is. And we know everything about this world. We know the price elasticity. We know our margins, our costs, and everything. Then actually pricing is very simple. So if we know our costs and we know the price elasticity, we know that in the profit optimum we always have margin times elasticity is -1. So for example, as in this example here, if our costs are 100 and we have a price elasticity of -2, then the profit optimal price is 200. And that's really all there is in this situation. So working on revenue management, working on pricing only makes sense if there's more complexity than this here. And luckily, I think for us, there is. So in the real world, there's not just a single product. Most of us are working in portfolios. They have to consider what competitors do. They have to consider what the environment does. Is there inflation going on? Are there other drivers that are relevant? So there's significant complexity. It's sometimes a burden, but I think it's also the reason why we exist as a field and why it makes sense to discuss it and talk about it. And that also brings us to the need to work with a proper understanding of what strategy is, and also a good understanding or a framework, a set of tools, how to deal with it. And to me, from what I've seen, when we discuss what is strategy actually, it's always between these two extremes here. On the one hand, understanding strategy as trickery, the Trojan horse here. So often I get a sense that there are some in the field who expect there's some sort of silver bullet, some price change or some new pack size that will save the day. And if they find it, they will achieve all of their goals. The other extreme is understanding strategy more as a labor's exercise of formal planning. And I would say that it's a bit of both. And in our practical world, I think for most of us, the relevance of strategy is more in terms of this formal planning aspect. And particularly because in more mature, established industries, it's very, very difficult to find these silver bullet or the Trojan horses that really save the day with a single move. And most of the world is really understanding how to differentiate prices, how to play properly with the different RGM levers that we have at our disposal to make it happen. So I think this is really the core understanding that needs to be in mind when we talk about strategy. So what's a practical framework for working with strategy? I find, and this goes back to also the time I was in universities, I think there's a fairly established framework, and I find it from a practical perspective the most useful one here from Richard Rommel, where he says strategy is actually an exercise in three steps. First, a diagnosis, so really understanding the nature of the challenge. What is our problem? I will come to what that means in the context of pricing and revenue growth management. So really understanding the situation, what is the challenge, then developing sort of a guiding policy. How do we deal with it? Do we deal with it only with price changes? Do we deal with it with promotions, with pack size changes, or do we want to limit ourselves to certain measures? And then the final step is coherent action. And coherent action can be very trivial, if it can be as trivial as just changing a single price, but it can also be very difficult and requiring a large sales force to implement a certain pricing strategy, or requiring lots of IT to really get the prices in front of the consumer has to pay them in the end. So coherent action can cover a very broad range of different activities. All right, so just to get a very basic understanding of what we mean with this framework, I always find it useful to have this David and Goliath example, just to highlight what the framework means. And if you look at the situation, and I use it because it's of course a story that pretty much everyone knows, but I think if you analyze it from a strategic point of view, it's very different from the way it's perceived generally. So we look at the situation from David's perspective and start with the diagnosis of the situation. So David has volunteered to participate in this fight, and he does what every good strategist does. He starts with a SWOT analysis, and very briefly, he identifies the threat, which is obvious: Goliath, strongest man in the world, and considered undefeatable. That's an obvious threat. The weakness: looks at himself, I'm very weak, so I don't have a chance in a proper fight with him. But there might be some strengths that I have as well. And in this particular case, he knows that he's very good with the slingshot, and has the additional strengths here that no one really knows about it. So it's a hidden advantage that he might be able to take advantage of. Then comes the opportunity, and that is he has detected a spot in Goliath armor that is unprotected, and that's fortunately right between the eyes of his opponent. So this is just a brief, but it really highlights the situation from a strategic point of view, where it's not as black and white and hopeless as it's often portrayed. So this is the diagnosis, and now the guiding policy, and this is really the important step here. So what he thinks based on the SWOT analysis, so I can beat him, but only if I get a good shot with my slingshot and he doesn't come too close to me. Therefore, he needs to be agile, he needs to be fast, because he will most likely only have a single shot or a single chance to win this fight. And a detail that's important in this story is when the rest of from his side heard that he was going to volunteer for the fight, they offered him an armor, and were confused when he refused it. But from a strategic point of view, that makes perfect sense, right? Because if he gets hit, the armor wouldn't really help that much, but it only would make him weaker. So from the strategic point of view, that's good strategy. That's drawing the right conclusions from the situation. So you need to be agile, and really put all your effort in the single chance, the single shot that you have. And we know from history that in the end, it worked out. So this is really highlighting, understanding what's the diagnosis, what's the challenge, and then deriving the proper guiding policy. Being fast and agile, coherent action means refusing the armor. And this is really to highlight the importance of strategic thinking in these situations, as a base rule. And if you want to have more of these examples, I really strongly recommend this book. It has quite a few further examples that highlight what good strategy means. All right, so coming back to our field, strategy, what does it really mean? If we go through these 3 steps: diagnosis, I think always a starting point is understanding what's the overall objective. As pricing and RGM professionals, we're not living in isolation, but we really need to do actions that are in line and support the overall company strategy. We need to have an understanding of the environment we live in. We'll look at some important drivers on the next slide, and then be able to derive the proper guiding policy from that. So do we only work with, for example, with price changes? Do we use portfolio changes? Do we work with promotions and so on? And then be able, depending on the context, to implement that using coherent action. So some of the most important ones, and Paul, Jonathan, if I think we have a question on these, should we ask it now, or when's the right time?
I think we can maybe just explain this first, and then
all right. So we just put together a list of things that we find relevant at the moment. We keep updating it, but we're very much interested in your thinking. And for RGM, from our perception, what's really important is that in maybe not in all categories, but for many categories, inflation is picking up again. We see cost increases. We see that this is a topic for many industries, for many companies at the moment. At the same time, we see that because of the cost increases, that discounter, dollar stores, and so on are thriving, increasing, of course, price, or using and as a feedback, also increasing the price sensitivity of users. On the other hand, we also see that the focus on ESG is a bit decreasing in the capital markets, particularly as many large investors, this has been in the news in the past week, are focusing more on profitability, more away from these ESG drivers and moving again more to profitability, which is of course has immediate implications for pricing and revenue growth management, because pricing and revenue growth management really even directly affect profitability of companies. Also, already mentioned, we see that the AI hype continues in the field, particularly with the emergence of generative AI. We did a quick search in the S&P 500 companies. 36% mention AI, I think, in their annual reports or quarterly reports, that they are dealing with AI or are working on an AI strategy. Also, we're seeing, in line with inflation, or triggered to some extent by inflation, major cost-cutting initiatives in many large companies, which also affect RGM in different ways. Of course, on the cost side, but also it might affect some teams, and they might require some readjustments, maybe increasing or decreasing the use of technology. So all of these factors are important in our point of view, and I think we're interested in understanding where you are in terms of these different drivers. Hello, Jonathan, can you start the?
Yes, Jonathan, can you activate the poll?
It's on now.
All right, so yeah, let us know which of these challenges you find most important in 2024. You can select multiple, or you can select other. If you say, oh, actually, we're missing a big one, please put some in the chat as well. Would love to see kind of what the audience thinks here, and let's also learn from each other. I won't bias the answers, but I'm very curious what will be the highest. I have some suspicions, but let's see how they're playing out. Jonathan, where are we? I always like to have like 60-70% participation.
We're at 50% now, 55, 60,
all
65.
Right. Let's get to that 70 mark. So everyone just read through it. What's the biggest challenge? You can select multiple, or you can select others and tell us in the chat, and let's discuss this now.
Okay. 1 minute running. I think I can stop it and share the results.
Okay, then let's do it.
Here they are.
All right, so we see inflation in front, with cost-saving programs actually tied. So that's, I mean, almost two sides of the same medal, I guess. And with high rates, people are looking to cut costs to, increase profits, since they can't push things like price that much anymore. But to some degree, we also, see persistent inflation in some vertical industries. But does this surprise you, Ingo, that both of these are tied for first?
I think I would have expected inflation a bit higher, but I would have seen those and then also AI on the third place to be the leaders here. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And if you have any other points, please do put them in the chat. Let us know if there's anything else that you think is relevant or challenging in 2024. But I'll hand back to you, Ingo, to continue with the program. Oh, I see here Karen is writing retail environment past suppliers. So I guess even outside of discounters, where more shoppers are moving, we see increased tension with retailers. So I think that's something that resonates with me speaking to CPG brands around the world.
Perfect. Thanks for the answers and the comments. So let's look at the first one. Of course, something like inflation has lots of implications. It's of course driven by what we do, by price increases, but it also affects our diagnosis, because it's still the topic we're dealing with. So here's just an example, and it's from last year, but it's still relevant as we've seen that there's a risk of inflation picking up again. So what you see here are sale. It's just some product, average price versus total sales. And you see, if you look at the time period until, what's it, mid of 2022, and we put them here in this scatter plot, and you see just roughly at the base price, at the higher price, the unpromoted price, you see roughly a price elasticity of minus 1.5, just very rough, using this linear regression here. But then when inflation picks up, in this case, middle of 2022, we see a price increase 35%, but we don't see a sales change. So, of course, very different implication for price elasticities. And these are things that need to be considered when doing an analysis. So using or making a prediction based on the price elasticity that was determined here by a regression in the old world without inflation would give very wrong indications for what happens then during the inflation time. And of course, that's also why it makes sense, for example, if a lot is at stake here, to work with proper diagnostics and use the proper tools. All right, so that was just a diagnosis. So when we looked at the different drivers that are important, it's of course important to understand what are the relevant ones. And then, for example, if inflation is relevant in the industry, we need to understand what we need to do with that. Or if in the survey or in the poll, it wasn't one of the higher ranking ones, but like a shift in focus from ESG more to profitability, if that's a real driver, that has immediate implications for our guiding policy. So if profit becomes more important, then when we look at different revenue profit combinations that are the result of our price changes or portfolio changes more generally, then we need to understand where we want to end up here. And this is also something just very roughly where we see that pretty much every organization is dealing with some sort of trade-off between revenue increase and profit increase when looking at pricing actions. And this also, of course, here just some sample quotes, how CEOs or the C-level of companies is thinking about these topics. I don't think I've seen a company that's purely aiming for profit maximization or purely aiming for revenue maximization. It's always some sort of trade-off between the two. And the question is always, of course, how to deal with that trade-off. And I just want to highlight this with a very simple example. For this, I need to just quickly switch my screen. One second. Paul, do you see my browser now?
Yes, I can see it.
That's one. Oh, it's too much, right? Okay, so super simplified example. We have 4 own products, different peanut bag sizes. We have 3 competitor products, competitor A, B, and we have a size. We have different brands. We can be in a promotion or not in a promotion. We have costs. We have everything. And I don't want to go into the details here, but if we have these different products, we can do different things. So, for example, we can do a price change. If we only change the price of a single product, of course, elasticity is very high because many of the shoppers here, the sales we lose here might go to one of our alternative products. If, for example, we also increase the price of the nearest alternative, elasticities go down. And again, if we increase also, or if competitors also increase, then we might even lose less because also the alternatives have become less attractive. So this is not going to go into details, but this is a part of our solution where you can really look at the changes. You can change different products, but you can also change not only the prices, but also the different product features. And what I want to highlight is, in this example, let's say we have this base case that we just looked at, and we're looking here at inflation. So what happens is that we have a cost increase. Sorry, that was the wrong one. We have a cost increase, and if we don't change our prices, then we still, of course, sell the same units. We have the same revenue, but we have less profit here because all our costs have increased, and we haven't changed our prices. So, and we have different options. We can also increase our costs here by 20% and just pass it on. We could also look at a downsizing. We decrease the size of all the different packs, go from 200 to 250 to 200 and so on. So decrease everything. And this has also not as good in terms of profit, in terms of revenue, also worse. So we can really look at with something like this at the different options of what we can do. And then if we go back, so this was just a very simplistic example, but if we go back to the presentation, Paul, do you see the PowerPoint again?
Yes.
Okay, so you can look at a very large number of these combinations, right? So each dot in this graph, so we have the increase in the profit and the increase in the revenue versus the status quo. So that means the status quo is somewhere around here. And each one of these dots is one of is one simulation like this. In the example I showed, it was very simplified, but it can also be, and typically is, like a full simulation across the different weeks, across the different promotions, everything that's going on. And what I'm trying to show here is that this is something that can be supported with the proper technology, where you then look at or let the system look at a large number of combinations and really find the best ones. And then typically also what we had in the previous graph, we have some sort of efficient boundary here where you can't improve one without reducing the other. So if you're here, you can't increase profit without losing revenue any further. So this is like an efficient boundary and you can't really go past it. And then including the third idea, the generative AI would really be, and this is, I think, the right way to introduce it or use it here in RGM, is that the technology allows you, or a language model, you train it on your annual reports, for example, or your internal strategy documents, and then let it select from these different options the one that's in line with the overall strategy. So when the overall strategy says, okay, we move from a focus on revenue more to a focus on profit, then you can use that technology to identify or better steer towards the options that are in line with the overall strategy. And it can be something simple. For example, you say, as an organization, we will not use 99 prices, so €9.99, but only 95 prices. I've seen companies that do that, and the solution would know about that. Or you would say, because we are such a dominant player in the market, we will not reduce prices because there's a large threat of a price war with our competitors. So we will only look at options that don't include price decreases. Alternatively, if you're a small player, this might be an option for you, right? So this is a way, I think the proper way of how to deal with this technology is that it essentially builds on an understanding of like a prediction, how will the market react if you change a price that's relevant for your scenario. And on top of that, you have essentially an optimization that selects the best offer changes in your portfolio. And then on top of that, you can use something like a generative AI model that helps the organization identify those options that are in line with the overall strategy, and really support the team in identifying like the best 3 or 4 options that then can be discussed with management. So I think this is the proper way of using generative AI in the RGM field. What I don't see, what I've seen in some cases, but I don't think is the right way forward, is what we call the halo effect in the generative AI halo effect in RGM, which is really, and I've seen this with some, and would be interested in how you're thinking about that. Is that in some cases I see that some think that because generative AI is good at some tasks, so it can summarize emails, or it can write emails, can do lots of text-based stuff, then it's probably also good in understanding how I should change my prices or my offer. And that's really not the case. I don't think it's the right technology for it, but it can be used on top of like a proper market simulation, or on top, then in addition, as we showed, on top of a proper optimization algorithm that is used by the language model to identify the best offer changes. So
Great.
much on integrating generative AI. Or do we have another survey here, or?
No, I think we're just at the end of time. That's why I was.
Okay. Yeah, I'll wrap it up. Last slide. So, and then of course the last step, coherent action, which is often the most that requires most work, because you need to implement the price changes that you've thought of. You need to negotiate them, for example, with retailers. You need to get your sales force to implement them. So this is the last step. Won't go into details, but it requires having the proper processes and monitoring the right organization tools and so on. I think we have material on that. If you're interested, we can certainly provide it. But I think this is always the last step. But the challenging one, the most difficult one, is certainly the guiding policy, where we spend most of our time on. Paul?
Great stuff. I already saw some good questions in the chat, and as always, we're happy to stick around. You'll receive the recording afterwards, and also let us know if you want to receive the slides. Happy to connect with you and share some of the slides as well. I have Adrian here asking a question for you, Ingo. He's asking, how accurate do these kinds of forecasts get? E.g., if I pick a point over on the revenue versus profit curve, what's the confidence interval around this?
It really depends. It depends on some extent on the quality of the data, but we often get an accuracy of 95%. So these are very accurate. Happy to discuss in more detail if you're interested.
Very good. Yeah, we're always happy to jump on a quick call to explain that a bit more. Do we have any more questions? I see that, and I just had a chat here with Thierry Louise, who was saying that inflation also depends on the market. So there's some inflation in the Nordics that's going down faster than expected, whereas I think in the US, the CPI print was just a bit higher than expected. So we're expecting slower rate cuts there, but the ECB is probably going to increase rate cuts faster. So it's definitely a regional difference. I also mentioned in my response that there's also an industry difference. So I think cocoa prices went up tenfold because of droughts in West Africa. So you can always have these outliers. And if you're a chocolate company and 10-15% of your COGS is cocoa, then that does have a big influence on you, of course. So here I have another question. I'm not sure if I understand, Nishant. How do we capture the matrices? If you can clarify that, let me know. And some people are asking for the slides. So yeah, we'll reach out to you after providing those slides for you. Any other questions from the audience here today? I think you covered it all. Left no questions. So very good job, Ingo. I also want to mention that we had our generative AI webinar last time. So this was in mid-March, as you can see. And we do have a white paper on generative AI in RGM that Ingo wrote. So if you want to receive that, also kindly let us know. You'll receive an email on Monday with the recording. So yeah, just reply and request that white paper to It's a very interesting read and two of the most interesting topics, I think, for everyone here. So thanks, everyone. Do see us at the next webinar. It's going to be on pack price architecture and how to optimize that. Given, less power on price that we mentioned, costs are becoming more important. So this seems to be a pressing issue for everyone. Yeah, let us know in the comments if there's anything else you would like to know. Get in touch if you want to learn more about Buynomics. And then, yeah, wish everyone a happy weekend.
Same from my side. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.